Policies on agrarian reform. Agrarian reform is essentially the rectification of the whole system of agriculture, an important aspect of the Philippine economy because nearly half of the population is employed with the agricultural sector, and most citizens live in rural areas. Agrarian reform is centered on the relationship between production and the distribution of land among farmers. It is also focused on political and economic class character of the relationship of production and distribution in farming and related enterprises, and how this connect to the wider class structure. Through genuine and comprehensive agrarian reform, the Philippines would be able to gain more from its agricultural potential and uplift the Filipino in the agricultural sector, who have been, for the longest time, suffering in poverty and discontent. Of agrarian reform in the Philippines, we turned our attention to our country's history, especially our colonial past, where we could find the root of agrarian roots of countries and episteme.
Land ownership in the Philippines under the Spain. When the Spaniards colonized the country, they brought with them a system of pueblo agriculture where rural communities often disappeared and scattered in nature were organized into pueblo and given land to cultivate. Families were not allowed to own their land. The King of Spain owned the land, and Filipinos were assigned to these islands to cultivate them, and they paid their colonial tributes to the Spanish, authorized in the form of the agricultural products. Later on, through the law of the Indies, the Spanish crown awarded tracts of land to religious orders, repartmentos for Spanish military as reward for their service, and the Spanish encomenderos, those mandated to manage the encomienda or the lands given to them, where Filipinos worked and paid their tributes to encomendero. Filipinos were not given the right to own land and only work in them so that they might have a share of the crops and pay tribute. The encomienda system was unfair and abusive system as copras y vandalas became the norm for the Filipino farmers working the land. They were made to sell their products at every low price, surrender their products to the encomenderos who resold his as a profit. Filipinos in the encomienda were also required to render service to their encomenderos that were unrelated to farming. From this encomenda system, the hacienda system developed in the beginning of the 19th century as the Spanish government implemented policies that would fast-track the entry of the colony in the capitalized world. The economy was tied in the world market as the Philippines became an exporter of raw materials and importer of goods. Agriculture exports were demanded and the hacienda system was developed as a new form of ownership. In the 1960s, Spain enacted a law ordering landholders to register their landholding, and only those who knew benefited from this. Lands were claimed and registered in the people's name, and many peasant families who were assigned to the land in the earlier days of recolonization were driven out or forced to come under the power of these people who claim rights to the land because they held a title. This is the primary reason why revolts in the Philippines were often agrarian in the nature. Before the colonization, Filipinos had communal ownership of land. The system introduced by the Spaniards became a better source of hatred and discontent for the Filipinos. Religious orders, the biggest landowners in the Philippines, also became a main source of abuse and exploitation for the Filipinos, increasing the rent paid by the Filipinos on a whim. Filipinos fought the Philippine Revolution in the confluence of the motivation, but the greatest desire for freedom would be necessity of owning land. Upon the end of the Philippines Revolutionary, the revolutionary government would declare all large landed estates, especially the confiscated friar lands and government property. However, the first Filipino Republic was short-lived. The entrance of the Americans would signal a new era of colonization and imperialism in the Philippines.
Land ownership in the Philippines under the Americans. The Americans were aware that the main cause of the social unrest in the Philippines was landlessness, and they attempted to put an end to the deplorable condition of the tenant farmers by passing several land policies to increase the small landholders and distribute ownership to a bigger number of Filipino tenants and farmers. The Philippine Bill of 1902 provided regulations on the disposal of public lands. A private individual may own 16 hectares of land, while corporate landholders may have 1,024 hectares. Americans were also given the rights to own agricultural lands in the country. The Philippine Commission also enacted Act Number 496, or the Land Registration Act, which introduced the Torrens system to address the absence of earlier records of issued land titles and conduct accurate land surveys. In 1903, the Homestead Program was introduced, allowing the tenant to enter into agricultural business by acquiring a farm of at least 16 hectares. This program, however, was limited to areas in northern Luzon and Mindanao, where colonial penetration have been difficult to Americans, a problem they inherited from the Spaniards. Land ownership did not improve during the American period. In fact, it even worsened. Because there was no limit to the size of land holdings people could possess, and the accessibility of possession was limited to those who can afford to buy, registered, and acquire fixed property titles. Not all friar lands acquired by Americans were given to landless peasant farmers. Some lands were sold or leased to American and Filipino business interests. This early land reform program was also implemented without supporting mechanism. If a landless peasant farmer received land, he only received land, nothing more. Many were forced to return the tenancy of the wealthy Filipino haciendados, purchased or forcefully took over lands from farmers who could not afford to pay their debts. The system introduced by the American enabled more lands to place under tenancy, which led to widespread peasant uprising, such as the Colorum and Sakdal uprising in Luzon. Peasants and workers found refuge from millenarian movements that gave them hope to change could still happen through militancy.
The Sakdal or Sakdalista uprising was a pleasant rebellion in central Luzon that lasted for 2 days. May 2 and 3, 1935, it was easily crushed by government forces then, but this historical event tells of the social inequality brought about by issues in land ownership and tenancy in our country. The Filipino word Sakdal means to accrue, which is the title of a newspaper helmed by Benigno Ramos. He relayed support from Manila, and nearby provinces brought the application, which led to the establishment of a Partido Sacdalista in 1933. They demanded reforms from the government such as the abolition of taxes and equal or common ownership of land, among others. They also opposed the dominant Nacionalista Party acceptance and gradual independence from the United States, and instead demanded immediate severance of a deal with America. For a new party with a small growth, they did well in the 1934 general election, scoring their seats in the House of Representatives and several local posts. This encouraged them to attempt an uprising in 1935. Upon being crushed, Ramon fell to Tokyo, and the Partido Sacdalista collapsed. During the year of a Commonwealth government, the situation further worsened as pleasant uprising increased and landlord-tenant relationship became more and more desperate. President Luzon laid down a social justice program focused on the purchase of haciendas, which were in the individual and sold to tenants. His administration also created the National Rice and Corn Corporation, or NARI, to assist public defenders to assist pleasant in court battle for their rights to the land, and the cure of industrial relations in exercise jurisdiction over disagreements arising from landowner-tenants relationship. The Homestead Program also continued brought the National Land Settlement Administration, or NLSA, effort toward agrarian reforms by the Commonwealth failed because of many problems such as budget allocation for the settlement program and well-spared pleasant uprising. World War II put a halt to all interventions to solve their problems as a Japanese occupied the country.
Next is post-war interventions toward agrarian reform. Rehabilitation and rebuilding after the war were focused on providing solutions to the problems of the past. The administration of President Rojas passed Republic Act No. 34 to establish 70 to 30 sharing arrangement between tenant and landlord respectively, which reduced the interest of landowners' loans to tenants at 6% or less. The government also attempted to redistribute hacienda lands, falling prey to the woes of similar attempts since no support was given to small farmers who were given lands. This code abolished share tenancy in the Philippines and prescribed a program to convert tenant farmers to lessees and later on owner cultivators. Under the term of President Elpidio Quirino, the Land Settlement Development Corporation, or LASIDICO, was established to accelerate and expand the resettlement program for peasants. Republic Act No. 1199, or the Agricultural Tenancy Act, was passed to govern the relationship between landholders and tenant farmers, protecting the tenurial rights of tenants and enforce tenancy practices. Through this law, the Court of Agricultural Relation was created in 1955 to improve tenancy security, fix and rentals of tenanted farm, and resolve land disputes filed by the landowners and peasant organizations. The Agricultural Tenancy Commission was also established to administer problems created by tenancy. The Agricultural Credit and Cooperative Financing Administration, or SCCFA, was also created mainly to provide warehouse facilities and assist farmers in marketing their products.
During Marcos' regime, martial law allowed him to dissolve the landlord-dominated Congress. Presidential Decree No. 27, issued in 1972, formed the core of Agrarian Reform. Focusing on rice and corn lands, it granted tenant farmers ownership of the specified portion, with the landowner retaining a limited area. Land cost was determined based on crop harvest, payable in 15 equal annual installments. Operation Land Transfer aimed at redistributing lands over 7 hectares. The Rice Self-Sufficiency Program, Masagana 99, enabled farmers to borrow for land and inputs. However, loopholes like changing crops and relying on wage labor allowed some landlords to invade reform. The elite efforts to maintain power, coupled with corruption, exact the elite's effort to maintain power, coupled with corruption, exacerbated challenges, leading to increased landliness and hindering the success of the reform program.
The post-1986 agrarian reform in the Philippines primarily refers to a comprehensive agrarian reform program initiated in 1988. This program aimed to redistribute agricultural lands to tenant farmers and promote rural development and social justice. CARP included land acquisition and distribution, support services for agrarian reform beneficiaries, and the provision of credit and infrastructure. Despite facing challenges such as implementation issues and resistance from landowners, CARP had a significant impact on land redistribution and the empowerment of rural communities. In the wake of 1986 People Power Revolution, the Philippines embarked on a transformative journey in agrarian reform. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARP, was introduced to address entrenched land inequality and rural poverty. Over time, CARP evolved, culminating in a comprehensive agrarian reform program extension with reforms, or CARPER, in 2009. CARPER aimed to expedite land distribution, enhance support services, and promote sustainable rural development. Despite challenges such as landowner resistance and bureaucratic hordes, CARPER represented a continued commitment to social justice and equitable land distribution. It recognized the importance of providing agrarian reform beneficiaries with the necessary resources and support to thrive as smallholder farmers. Overall, the post-1986 agrarian reform era in the Philippines was characterized by legislative reforms and programmatic initiatives aimed at empowering rural communities and promoting inclusive growth. While obstacles persist, the ongoing efforts underscore the government's dedication to addressing historical injustices and fostering a more equitable society.
Carper and the Future of Agrarian Reform in the Philippines. The new deadline of CARP expired in 2008, leaving 1.2 million farmer beneficiaries and 1.6 million hectares of agriculture land to be distributed to farmers. In 2009, President Arroyo signed Republic Act No. 9700, or the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program Extension with Reforms, or CARPER, the mandatory law that extended the deadline of 5 more years. Section 30 of the law also mandates that any case and/or proceeding involving the implementation of the provisions of CARP as amended, which may remain pending on 30 June 2014, shall be allowed to proceed to its finality and executed even beyond such date. From 2009 to 2014, CARPER has distributed a total of 1 million hectares of land to 900,000 farmers beneficiaries after 7 years of land reform of to Aquino's administration. 500,000 hectares of land remain undistributed. The DER and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DENR, are the government agencies mandated to fulfill CARP and CARPER, but even the combined effort and resources of the two agencies have proved incapable of fully achieving the goal of agrarian reform in the Philippines. The same problems have plagued implementation, the powerful landed elite, and the ineffectual bureaucracy of the Philippines government. Until these two challenges are surmounted, genuine agrarian reform in the Philippines remain but a dream to Filipino farmers who had been fighting for their right to land ownership for centuries.